Welcome, sentient beings from all known universes and beyond. It's time to activate your cranial downlinks and prepare to receive a raft of discussion on a cosmic ocean of science fiction and fantasy topics, interviews with local area genre devotees, and insightful prognostication by our soothsayers of science fiction, our forecasters of fantasy, and any other beings that happen to get caught in our gravity well. This is the Galactic Driftwood Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. I'm Bill.
I'm Linda.
I'm Charles.
And I'm Chris.
And I'm Ben.
And Ben's joining us today for a special discussion we're going to have on UFOs. Seems to have been an interesting week for UFO stuff for Linda and Ben and I, at least. Started out last Saturday. Local university has a UFO study group, and they had put a notice on Facebook that they were having a meeting to discuss UFOs. So we thought, oh, that sounds interesting. Let's go to that. And so we did. And I don't know, Ben, how would you summarize that event?
It was a waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah. It was quite the eye-rolling affair. Go ahead, Ben.
Yes, it was quite the eye-rolling affair. We were hopeful. There were a couple of people from UFON there, and we had never been to one here locally before. So with everything going on in the news and the recent, I'd say, revelation since 2017, the ufology is kind of having a renaissance right now. We were all pretty hopeful.
Yep. But it kind of took a bizarre, hard left turn, I guess, or right turn. I don't know. But it was a hard turn. It was a hard turn. We had trouble keeping our eyeballs from rolling too far back in our head.
What? So what was the format of the event? Was it just a social gathering, a presentation?
No, it was a presentation, and they had a number of speakers scheduled to talk. The first one couldn't make it. And for me, that was kind of a promising sign, because the first speaker was like on psychic healing or something like that.
Okay.
Right?
Got a headache.
Yeah.
Ufology always has a certain amount of woo and a certain amount of scientific attempt to figure out what's going on. And
this was
it was kind of heavy on the woo.
Yeah. Yeah, real heavy. So, but it was interesting. So, after that event, I got an email about the scientific inquiry group.
We needed a mind flush.
Yeah, there was a video put out by a guy named Brian Dunning, who I've heard from before. He's kind of pretty active in the skeptic community. And so he put out a new documentary on UFOs. And it's called The UFO Movie They Don't Want You to See. And so it kind of makes an attempt to go in and talk about UFOs from a more hard science perspective, I guess. And look at, what are the barriers to species communicating over great distances, and what are the likelihoods that an alien civilization would recognize that this planet housed an intelligent civilization. And so it was about an hour and a half documentary, and I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. I think, Ben, maybe you might have a different perspective on it.
I think it probably should have been titled The UFO Movie You Don't Want to See. I think if you were playing a drinking game for how many times that gentleman blinked, you'd be stone sober by the end of the movie. There was, I think, I wasn't a fan of his presentation. About 2/3 through, I watched that with my father, and I was like, this guy is very much like this Mick West character, and he's just the worst. And then Mick West came on. I was like, oh.
I'd never heard of Mick West before.
Yeah, and then I was explaining to him how he's citing official government investigations and reports for the proof that nothing happened. But that's like the government's always going to tell you that nothing happened. So he's like, look right here, it says that this didn't happen and it was just a lighthouse and it was that and the other. I'm like, yeah, they're going to say that for every kind of thing like that that's going on. So that's the worst information to cite as proof of stuff. But we'll get into that.
Okay. All right. Well, so I guess his program started off talking with some astrobiologists, and the general consensus from the astrobiologists is that, based on the information that they're getting back from, these advanced telescopes that are looking at these alien worlds that we're finding, that they believe the universe could be teeming with life. And that they obviously can't tell whether it's, primitive microbial life or whether it's intelligent life, but the conditions and the distribution of elements and things like that seem to be supportive of that idea. And then they talked about the Miller-Urey experiment, and that was an experiment done in 1952. Two scientists, Miller and Urey. I think it was, I had their first names. I can't remember them now. I think it was like Steve, and I know it wasn't Randy, but I can't remember the Urey's first name. But anyway, what they did is they tried to simulate the conditions thought to exist in the atmosphere of the early prebiotic Earth. And so they put all these ingredients into a test tube, and then they sent an electric spark through there for a period of time to simulate lightning in the atmosphere. And what they were able to, the results they were able to achieve was the production of 20 complex amino acids, which are essentially the building blocks of life. Yep. And so that was pretty a revolutionary discovery at the time. And since then, it's been repeated quite a bit. And actually, over the intervening years, we've gotten a much better idea of the atmospheric composition at that time. So they've modified that initial condition to more accurately reflect what the conditions were, repeated the experiment, and they got even better results. So so that's a pretty good indicator that at least these complex chemicals could be on rocky worlds throughout the universe, and making the possibility of life arising on other worlds quite common. And then they talked about the number of worlds that we found based on the Kepler telescope, and it searched a small region of the sky, and I think I have that here somewhere. Let me find
it's the image I'm thinking of. It was way more than I would have thought it would be.
Yeah.
And their benchmark is possible.
Yeah. So all those circles are, they've kind of superimposed it over a picture of the galaxy, but where you see that little blob of kind of bluish color, that little square blob there, That was the area that Kepler focused on. And within that small area of our own galaxy, they found over 5,000 planets. And so they now think this tells us that there are likely tens of billions of planets just in our own galaxy. So
was it Kepler or was it James Webb?
It was Kepler, because a lot of those planets are named like Kepler 26A, and so, but they've been doing more work now with the James Webb telescope, so that number's likely increased. This was as of 2022.
These were all Goldilocks zone planets, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that was interesting. So they said, there's all these planets, and they can now look at these planets with telescopes and get a good idea of the type of atmosphere that those planets have, and whether or not they have a lot of water on them, a lot of moisture in the air. They can tell if they've got different chemicals necessary for the existence of life, and they're finding that quite a bit. So they say the fact that we can go out and do that indicates that another civilization somewhere that had the same advancement as ours and the same technology or whatever would also be able to look and see our world and tell that, there are the chemicals, not only the chemicals there for life, but the chemicals that indicate that life actually has evolved, and they could even see signs of technological advancment on our planet.
They're
so
probably sitting there going, lost cause, move on.
Yeah, right. But they could see that our world to them would appear as a very interesting place to visit. So if they were going to visit somewhere, ours would be one of the top planets on their list to go visit, which is interesting. So I don't know if you guys have any comments on that. I mean, I know, Chris, you said you were surprised at the number of planets. So was I. I think I had, as he was talking about it, I was thinking, maybe in the 200 to 300 range of planets out there, but was anybody else?
I wouldn't have even thought over 100, and maybe that's because, again, whatever the bar is that they set for what would, there's the potential, and then there's the likeliness of it.
I don't think he gave a very good definition of his Goldilocks zone. So
I would have preferred, I'm fine with those being the potential, but I'd like to have another layer or two above that where you can go even more in depth to maybe apply some additional filtering, so to speak, in terms of what would make it even more likely that these planets are something we should focus in on or look at. Do we see changes over the last, if we look at it for 100 years, do we see any changes to the makeup of those planets that would suggest technological advancements or anything like that we would be able to see? So, and it may just be we've not been looking at them long enough to see that, right? Like we would know our planet would have changed over time to look different. So what does it look like when we look at others? And I don't know if we're tracking that, but to me, when you start to see those changes, maybe that suggests something there is making that change, as opposed to the planet naturally going through whatever transformation it's doing. But some of those things take billions of years too. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the other thing to keep in mind too is that as you're looking at these planets that are hundreds or thousands of light years away from us, we're looking at them as they were maybe up to thousands or tens of thousands of years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so if someone was looking at our planet tens of thousands of years ago, they're looking at us now. They've got the technology to look. They're going to see us as we were, I think at the end of the last ice age, probably. Right. When you had, primitive tribes of people walking the planet. So there wouldn't be much sign of technological advancement here. There would be life, which would make it interesting. But, look at how many years they would have to wait to see the advancement of our technology. So, but that's not to say that some of these worlds that we're looking at maybe got their start billions of years before ours. So they could be way, way ahead of us technologically, and maybe we could see that.
The further out you go, the older it is.
Right.
Which means they've been around longer. So,
The whole place could be teeming with life, advanced life. We wouldn't know it.
Now, the question is, would it still be biological life, or would AI have taken over and wiped out the...
That's the newer question.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So then he kind of went into a thing about talking about physics, and he was talking with astrobiologists, astronomers, and astrophysicists about the physics of the universe, and how do we know that the physics where we live is the same as the physics in a very remote part of the universe. And that was kind of an interesting discussion, and basically focused around the cosmic microwave background radiation, and how no matter where we look, we can see that light, that's cosmic microwave background radiation is the leftover light from the formation of the universe, the Big Bang. And so it's sort of omnipresent throughout the universe. And no matter where we look at that light that's left over, it corresponds exactly to our physical models of what that light should look like, how far it should have dimmed, the distribution, the clumping, and all of that sort of stuff over billions of years. And
on
so
the third dimension.
What's that?
On the third dimension.
On the third dimension. I'm not sure what you mean, Ben.
That means that the laws of physics absolutely apply on this plane of existence, on this dimensional plane of existence.
Right.
You have a first, second, or third, fourth through 11th.
Aren't there some questions about some of the dark matter areas?
Yeah, dark matter.
Physics falls apart there a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say
they did gloss over some things.
Well, not we. But the thing with that is you're anchoring it to one truth, to one fact that you know. And you're basing everything off of that. And sure, you can get it to look or replicate in other areas, but the reality is we're barely scratching the surface of what we know that's out there in the cosmos and the universe. So, to me, a lot of times when I think about that, I think that's great and all. I think it helps us make guesstimates, but we're projecting our own limitations of what we know of physics into this massive galaxy, and it's like, well, we only know what we know. Over time, physics or what we thought we knew tends to change. We live on a planet where people are like, the Earth is flat. And
right.
Clearly,
and some people still think that.
So, I'd hate for us to come to find out later that, in some other part in this galaxy that we're looking at, that those laws of physics are actually different. These are our laws of physics. Is how I would put it. Yeah. And while I do think it, people obviously way smarter than me have a way to kind of more or less verify it that it should work this way. To Charles' point, between dark matter, oddities, and black holes in a space or whatever we're looking at, there are areas where we look at from a telescope and we're like, what the crap is this?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and they use this math thing, right? So math is math, and they come up with the same math that we do, and it's like, wait a minute, what?
All base 10.
Math is a universal language. One is one regardless.
Yeah.
2 is 2 regardless. But
yes,
dimensionally, if you were to look into that, that's when that kind of starts to possibly break down. That's why they say that some of these things phase in and out potentially of our current reality or our current, we're three-dimensional beings trying to comprehend four-dimensional objects passing through our space, which is really difficult to wrap our brains around. We have a very fundamental understanding with regards to tesseracts and certain things but we can't even really visualize it, just like a two-dimensional aspect would not be able to. Curtis Cassatt has a really great video on this, as well as, the fact that dark matter is kind of a catch-all for we don't know yet. And it's just a convenient, it's stuff we're trying to figure out. We're new.
Dark matter and dark energy, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he did touch on that a bit. He kind of went down the track of, well, we developed math, and from that we've developed physics, and we understand things. And he said that suppose that we went down the wrong path. Suppose that, our math took us in a particular direction. And that maybe that's the direction that a lot of civilizations take. But other civilizations might figure out math differently. Thanks. Might figure out math differently. And that math might then lead them to finding a way to cover vast distances of space in no time at all, allowing them to visit any world that they wanted to visit at any time. They just decide to go there, and boom, they're there. And so he said, based on the fact that our Earth would be a very attractive place to visit, simply because of the chemicals that they could detect that we have in the atmosphere and stuff like that. You would presume that these species that had figured out the right path to physics and determined how to evade these limitations, speed of light limitation, the stuff that our physics tells us is there. You'd think that at least some of them would come and maybe land somewhere and say, hey, we're here, you're not alone anymore. And he said, because of the vastness of space, presumably there would be a lot of species that would go down either path. We go down the path that we don't think we can cross these vast distances, but maybe we missed something. But a lot of species, probably you could say maybe half goes one way, half goes another. And if that's true, then there could be potentially a lot of different alien species visiting us. And some could be friendly, some could be hostile. What's that, Charles?
We did kind of miss, I think it was a miss in the communication across vast distances might be different also.
Yeah.
Like there could be a species out there that's trying to communicate with us right now through gravity waves. And we're just not quite there yet.
Yeah, we're assuming that we are communicating in some type of universal method that
and that's got to be about the speed of light, and so we might be just right on the cusp.
Right.
We just
we just haven't got the technology yet to understand what they're saying.
Or there also could be forces in the universe we haven't discovered yet. Not much. I mean, because we're talking gravity and magnetism, and but we know in the quantum level there's some extra stuff.
Lots of extra stuff and superposition, instantaneous, regardless of distance. Yeah,
and so I think there's he's leaving it out that there is the possibility that one of those things. I don't know about travel, but at the very least. We could be getting another alien civilizations, comedy show eventually from a billion years back.
Just convert those gravity waves into a TV program.
Into the TV program, yeah. The first political speech, something like that.
Yeah. So let's say that was kind of the discussion on distance, that maybe it's possible that aliens could have discovered a different type of physics or different mathematical laws that would allow them to cover this distance instantaneously. So his question then is, why aren't there hostile aliens that are just out to destroy or take over? Or why aren't there friendly aliens just saying, hey, we're here? He said, sure, there's probably a percentage of them that may want to stay hidden and just observe us, but you'd think that there'd be other aliens that had achieved this technology that would be willing to show themselves, maybe like, the Star Trek visitors, when they do first contact. Maybe they have a first contact protocol and they come and they arrive and they land on the White House lawn.
Independence Day, and they break off into a bunch
Yeah.
of tiny ships and obliterate us, right?
Right. What'd you think of that part, Ben?
I have lots of theories on lots of these things. I think that we're a shoot first, ask questions later kind of species, and I think that over the course of humanity's existence, there have been many attempts at communication, and they haven't always gone so great. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Okay. So the next thing he talked about was the Christmas tree problem. And somebody want to talk about that? I feel like I've been doing a lot of the talking here.
Problem.
Yeah. So essentially, Christmas tree problem is, civilizations spread throughout the universe could be a lot like a Christmas tree light, right? The Christmas tree light comes on, and when it's on, that represents the time at which an advanced civilization capable of space travel or long distance communication exists. You have the species evolves, they get technology, they get these abilities, and then they meet their end at some point in the future, either by getting hit with a gamma ray burst or a killer asteroid or war, nuclear war, pandemic, something like that, and it wipes the species out. And what's that?
All the good stuff.
Yeah. And so what his point there was that, you could have civilizations popping up and then going away all over the universe throughout time. And the problem is in communicating with another species is you both have to be around at exactly the right time to be able to communicate with one another. And that's kind of a problem.
And you have to be close.
You'd have to be close enough for the time frame to communicate, because obviously if you're a million years apart, I mean, humanity hasn't even been around for a million years, right? We've only had high technology for 100 years or 150 years, something like that. And who's to say that, in 2025, we don't have a nuclear war that wipes us out. So maybe we only exist for 150 or 200 years. So that makes it kind of tough for communication with another species, because you both have to have the technology to communicate, and then you have to be close enough for this communication, if it's propagating at the speed of light, which is the physics we know, to be able to communicate, right? And so you're kind of limited by that. Now, granted, there might be something equivalent to maybe subspace communication like we see in Star Trek, where maybe it's much faster, more instantaneous, and we just haven't figured that out yet. You guys have any thoughts on that?
It's a very valid.
There's a safer bet. I mean, to me, that's for civilizations that haven't mastered space travel.
Yeah,
because I think once I can be wrong on this too, but let's say we flash forward 500 years and we haven't blown ourselves up or whatever.
Yeah.
And now we've got a colony on Mars and a colony on some moon on Jupiter or something. Isn't it less likely that our civilization is going to disappear at that point?
Yeah,
I mean,
you would think so. And that's the key, I guess, is getting out there.
It does appear that we haven't run into anybody with permanence.
Yeah.
So the Christmas, but I do think the Christmas tree light, if there was somebody with permanence, it's a different model.
Yeah, so that's a good point, Charles, is that if as a species you're able to spread out to other planets, you decrease the likelihood that your species is going to be destroyed by a nuclear event or
It still might be that you have to spread out past solar systems.
yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, and that's I could see that because we could have our sun emit a giant solar flare, right? That maybe
Take
takes
everybody
out the
out.
Earth, and maybe if we had a base on the moon,
Mhm.
the moon could be hit as well, right? There's what a 50-50 chance that the moon's it's a full moon when the solar flare reaches out and hits us, and if it's a full moon, the moon's going to be directly in the path of that flare as well. So, you have any thoughts on that, Ben?
No, I'm picking up what you guys are putting down. I think the whole thing with regards to civilizations, ascending and descending, and everything has to be in the right order. I agree with that. I think that my personal opinion is again has to do with dimensions. I don't think time is a thing that we as human beings perceive in a certain way, but I don't know that that's the way time necessarily is. And so
Another thing we're comparing to a single
here,
fact.
right here for us and these
Yeah.
vast distances, and
Yeah.
on the third dimension with the current laws of physics that operate in that third dimension, these are impossibly huge distances to cross in a direct line at the speed of light, right?
Yeah.
But for other
More advanced
dimensions,
species.
Aliens that divide by zero, they can fold space-time, warp space-time. They can traverse it differently than we can in a straight line. So I think that it's we're very there's a word for it where we feel everything kind of revolves around us and our way of thinking. This is the way it is, outwardly.
Yeah.
I think we're looking at it through that very human lens of our very tiny understanding of what's going on, and trying to make sense of that and trying to overcome these. How would someone do that based on what we know of how it could even be done? And I think that's just a very limited way of thinking, because it is correct. Yeah, these are impossibly huge distances that you would not be able to traverse in a straight line going the speed of light or faster than the speed of light. Even it would be on this plane of existence.
Yeah. So obviously, if you had access to advanced enough technology where you could fold space or maybe travel in different dimensions, I always think of that analogy of the flatworms on the surface of an apple. If the flatworm is wants to get from one side of the apple to the other, the flatworm, because he only lives in two dimensions, he crawls along the surface of the apple to the far side. But if you suddenly create a hole through the middle of the apple that allows the worm to go straight through to the other side, he can make it there much faster. But because he has no concepts of up or down, he would have no concept of going down through this wormhole to the other side.
Correct.
And it would be, equivalent to us. We've got our three dimensions of up, down, left, right, forward, and backward. But maybe there's another set of directions, let's call it orange and green, that goes into a dimension that we don't perceive of, that we don't understand yet. And the key is how do you develop technology in order to open that wormhole, so to speak, through that orange and green direction to take you somewhere else. So right.
And I think dimensionally, if you are above that dimension, you can observe and do the math for the dimensions below you.
Right.
But not above you.
Yeah.
So a fourth dimension could easily interact with us, or a fifth or a sixth, but we have no ability to try and deal with that. So
yeah.
I can switch.
Yeah.
One of the real frustrating things watching this documentary was how many, because I think it was all of them, all the times they thought they saw UFOs, it could be explained through natural phenomena.
Right.
And it got me to thinking. I remember years, this is just personal story, but 20 years ago almost, I saw a sundog. It was a winter's day. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those.
No.
This last winter we did, yeah.
Yeah, it was real. The one I saw was down in the river valley here, and there's all of a sudden there's 3 suns. And I didn't go, hey, look, my son just had babies and I've got 3 sons. Right. I didn't call the newspaper, or some people call the newspaper just because it was on the TV, but they didn't call going, hey, something's happened to the sun. Everybody involved looked for natural phenomena first.
Yeah.
Which is, you have, and we know what it is. It's ice. It's like ice crystals in the sky and some cloud cover.
Sure.
And suddenly it looks like you have an extra sun or two. And some of them, the one I saw, it really looked like 3 different suns. It didn't look like a halo effect like that. And so what is sort of frustrating is that I'll do that for myself. My experiences, I'll look for natural phenomena first, but some of these bozos out there are wasting our time when obviously it was the lens on their camera, or
aberrations within their lenses and reflections.
And then even with some of the military stuff, anytime you're dealing with waves, I think there's a possibility of echoes or interference patterns, and just it happens with sound. I think it happens with light.
Yeah,
it's not something you experience all the time, but it happens.
Yeah, they did the slit experiment, right, where they fired single photons.
That's a crazy experiment, sir.
We can
do a whole show on just that.
You want a physics course where they did sound. You have a radio going from one spot, right, and you're in a fairly square auditorium, and you can find spots where the radio's not making noise anymore. It doesn't seem like it is.
Right.
It just disappears.
Yeah.
And so our perceptions, there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Ben, you want to talk a little bit about the double slit experiment? That's kind of an interesting, story.
Thing.
No, that'll get us off on a different tangent. I want to. We could definitely do that sometime, because I think being able to peek into the fact that things aren't as they seem.
Yeah.
Here where we are currently, that's probably that's probably my favorite thing to bring up with people with regards to that. But Charles is right. However, these videos, especially the military ones and some of the other ones, these guys are out there every day. They're out there running stuff daily. They're out there doing training exercises. These were not the same thing I saw necessarily last week. They freaked out when they saw this and recorded this. When they bring up Rendlesham,
do you want to talk about Rendlesham and what that is for our listeners that may not know?
Yeah, so Rendlesham was it's kind of like Britain's Roswell, I guess, is what it's considered. It's a very famous story, and unfortunately it has, because of the UFO circuit and because there is money to be made amongst the easily convinced, it has gotten kind of muddied with extra details that weren't there when it originally happened. However, that UFO incident that happened out in Suffolk, England, in December of 1980, there was a bunch of people that it was a multi-day incident, and they went out to investigate lights that were traveling through trees. There were crafts. But the main thing I wanted to kind of bring up is that the people that were out there, this was in 1980, right? The base was built in 1943. Okay.
Yep.
And the lighthouse that this gentleman brought up in his deal was built in, well, let's see here, 1792. Can't say, the official thing was they were seeing the light from a lighthouse that was 5 or 6 miles away.
Yeah.
They've been out there for decades. They didn't see this light previously and see it after. This was an event. This wasn't a light that you saw, because they would have seen that light for decades prior or since. That's not what they were. And so people that come out and kind of debunk that as being this thing, don't take into account that if you've seen the light on a radio tower outside your house for 20 years,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden something else happened, someone tried to tell you that's just the light on top of the tower, and you're like, I've been here for 20 years, I know what that looks like. This was not that. That's what happened. 100%.
What would you say to the thing where they overlaid this beeping that represented the 5-second interval of the lighthouse with the conversation of the audio conversation recorded of the guys out there when they're seeing the light? And that seemed to match up pretty well.
It did seem to match up pretty well. That was coincidence, in my opinion. And it's because there were so many people involved with that the people that are really skeptical, and people like Nick West, just as there are people that are will grasp at the craziest straws to try and prove that something that's obviously a fake is a UFO, there are skeptical people that will reach for the craziest straws to try and debunk something. And I just think that, think about it, a 5-second interval and one piece of that, and he's like, nailed it, case closed, lighthouse and this time thing, and nothing happened here. There's nothing to see here. The official report says that, blah, 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 blah. No, I think you'd have to, these guys weren't reporting a Roswell type incident 2 months prior, 2 years prior, 20 years prior, or since. It was one weekend. It was a crazy singular situation. It wasn't something that happens all the time. So I just think that was coincidental, in my personal opinion.
All right.
Is the lack of, them not reporting it before, though, how to phrase this? When did we first start seeing reports of UFOs, right? Like when did that first become a thing, and was this after the fact? Meaning, like, you wouldn't have had reports ever prior because it wasn't a thing. There wasn't notoriety to get out of it. There wasn't, some kind of popularity thing to get out of it. Just to throw that out there.
I think in 1980 UFOs have been a thing since antiquity. They've been around, and
they're pretty well known in the 80s.
Yeah, they're just as well known in the 60s and the 40s, and I don't think that there was I might be picking up on what you're putting down as far as some notoriety, some 5 minutes of fame to be gained from that, a book, some money to be made, whatever. And I think that definitely has probably become more of a thing since then.
Yeah.
But I don't think that these people would put their jobs on the line, or the government wouldn't have had such a big response to this situation if it was just a lighthouse, same lighthouse that's been there for hundreds of years.
Yeah. Didn't they, the pilots in the Korean War, didn't they refer to the strange craft or lights as Foo Fighters, I think?
That was World War II, yeah. Those were orbs of light that chase things around, and there's just
so even as far back as World War II, that kind of thing was known.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's paintings and carvings and things that go back since forever. People like to look for that stuff, and I think that has a lot more weight to it than things that can be easily faked with modern technology. So a lot of people put more effort into researching things where that technology didn't exist. It would be harder to,
Yeah, he called that. he called that anecdotal evidence, videos, pictures, things that can be easily
faked.
And there's a lot more of unfortunate, anecdotal stuff that ends up out there than realistically. And so I my take on watching the film was he did a very good job of at least saying sometimes the simplest explanation is exactly what it is. There are some things that are still questionable regardless of what other evidence that you have, but I thought he did a very good job of giving a broad range of different types of things, from what pilots see to, scientifically, here's what the camera kind of makes things look a little bit off if you're viewing it from an aircraft, and what the lens does to the picture, explain distance and speed and stuff like that. So there was actually a pretty good, I thought, take on what's anecdotal and what can be explained through phenomena that's naturally occurring, and how we view things with different cameras and things like that. So I did appreciate that. And the thing with the lighthouse and the timing, I struggle with that one because where is I don't know. For me it's that tangible evidence, right? It's that something that's more than just either hearsay by word of mouth and stuff like that. So, and I hate to say, I've not had an experience myself, so therefore, it's limited on what could realistically be out there. I don't believe in that at all. I believe I'm limited in my own experience, but I also believe in, where's my tangible proof, right? And that's always been a struggle with it. I think he did a good job of basically saying, look, we should at least go through these exercises in terms of science and physics and stuff like that first, before we just assume that it's some
alien
UFO, otherworldly thing going on. And
it's kind of approach. It's the approach of doing your due diligence to rule out the obvious things. Right. And then to say, okay, well, we've ruled out the fact that it wasn't a celestial object. It's not airborne clutter. It's not weird lights on the ground. It's not
swamp gas, sky,
whatever. And I think it's important to go through and do that and rule out what could be a legitimate explanation for what you saw. To the point
Bill,
where, okay, what we're left with then is a truly unexplainable event that could be an alien spacecraft or an alien visitor.
Touch a little bit on that congressional committee to research UFOs and what all it included.
Grush and the most recent one. So you've got David Grush has come out as a whistleblower to shine a light on the fact that there are projects that are allegedly NHI or non-human intelligence related, that tons of money are being siphoned off to, that are controlled by or have been handed off to corporations versus government agencies, so that they're protected from FOIA requests and other things, from oversight, basically. And so you have people in Congress that are in charge of paying attention and having people justify expenditures, and the books aren't balancing, and this guy went digging into what's going on, and when he started digging, he started being threatened, and he decided to go public with it, and they are hauling in all sorts of high-ranking military officials, private sector people with they're trying to get people with firsthand knowledge. They're trying to get whistleblowers to come forward without penalties of breaking NDAs or being thrown in some sort of military jail or things of that nature. So they're trying to. There's a push right now, and then you have Arrow, which is the I don't want to get the thing wrong here, but it's basically Blue Book 2.0, which is the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, and those guys are they are running interference for this stuff getting out, and they are basically the swamp gas and Planet Venus people who are saying there's nothing to see here. And it's really a question of money right now that they're coming at it from that angle, and they're trying to find proof. And the people that are in Congress that should have the authority to dig into these matters are being told no, and they're like, we're congressional. You can't tell us no. And they're like, yeah, well, this is above you. And so to them, this is like, wait a minute, there is this shadow government that's pulling the strings and we don't have access to it. And so that's kind of being discussed in some public domains as well as behind closed doors and compartmentalized what they call SCIFs, which are, top secret meetings. And hopefully there's enough movement and enough people that are going to come forward to where they call it catastrophic disclosure versus a more planned release. There are people that think that there's some sort of weird deadline that we're under to kind of deal with this by 2027, I think, or 2030. But there just seems to be a weird immediacy to a lot of this stuff versus the standard narrative of, there's nothing to see here and it's all government stuff and whatnot. That's a terrible.
Even if we were blocking this information, what about other governments in other parts of the world? Because presumably UFOs are country agnostic, right? They just land wherever they want to. You would think that other countries might have evidence of UFOs that they'd be willing to share.
Other countries have come forward. Other countries have stated that this is a problem. We deal with this all the time. However, there are countries out there that kind of have the ability to lean on or affect. If there were a crash in a country in South America, there'd be a race between the obvious players of China, Russia, and the US to get that technology first, regardless of the laws or the agreements that we have and the boundaries with these countries. We're going to be there and we're going to do the thing. And I think we have the ability to lean on some countries really hard with regards to things. There are ally powers and there are agreements, and who knows what sort of backroom dealings happen. But there are countries that have been like, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and say it. Yes, we've been tracking these things. No, we don't know what they are. Or, yes, we do have some crash stuff, but I don't know. It's a huge conversation with lots of moving parts. And I think a healthy amount of skepticism is great. I think absolutely Chris is 100%. You are 100% to have that, but I don't think you can discount what some of these people are saying and experiencing firsthand. And when you see someone like Commander David Fravor, who was flying with the Tic Tac and all that stuff, hearing someone like Mick West, I would take Commander Fravor's 100% hasn't deviated from. He was there. Mick West was not. Mick West is going to do everything he can to try and disprove this, but no, there's a lot of people that were on ships, that were on radar, they were on, they were in other planes that are dealing with these things, saying that we see these things all the time. They're out there for hours and hours and hours. No drone can stay self-powered that long in crazy winds, do some of the maneuvers that they're doing. And those people that are seeing this, they're risking their careers, they're risking all sorts of things to even say anything. And people that are hardcore debunkers are going to really try and do anything they can to just say that this is everyday normal stuff. Balloons out in the middle of the oceans or a drone. I mean, Bill, you fly drones. How long would the best drone last? Tons of miles out in the middle of the ocean.
Well, certainly not
a battery,
not a commercial drone. No, wouldn't last very long. I don't know. Maybe it's one of those high altitude predator drones that can stay aloft for a long time, but those don't move very fast.
No, they fly very conventionally, and these are not conventional things that these guys are experiencing, and that's what's kind of freaking them out. And we don't have they're coming back and they're like, we couldn't get near it, we couldn't track it, we couldn't see it, but it shows up on this, but it doesn't show up on this, and then a different day it does show up on that, but not on this. It's a weird thing.
It is weird, and that's where it's my point. I was like, if you have a way to I hate to say, not explain it, but even if you can replicate it using different phenomena, we have weird things that happen. And so what sucks is, out of 100 pilots, it might be 70 of them that are totally explainable through some other weird phenomena that occurred with what they were seeing. And it's that 30 that we're really trying to dig into that have no explanation. And and that's where I viewed it as I didn't know who Mick West was until I watched.
Yeah, I didn't either.
So
just to throw out a timely fact, just right now. No, I'm not talking military stuff, but industry, because it's my company did this actually. Right now, it's 77 miles beyond the visual line of sight for drone operation within industry.
Oh. So commercial industries can make drones that they can fly out to 77 miles?
Yeah, we can do inspection drones up to 77 miles now.
Okay. I saw, kind of a little bit of a tangent. I saw a news report today that the FAA has just cleared drone swarms to be used in farming. Drones that are over 55 pounds. They can create swarms of 3 drones and use them for farming, for dispersal of insecticides and seeds and stuff like that. So that's kind of a new thing. And they don't have to have an independent observer with them when they're flying those now. You can just have a pilot, and then you can have a second guy that's just responsible for refilling the drone's tanks or whatever.
They've been doing it for quite a while since I've been flying, even back in the mid 2000s, like 2005, 6, 7. They've been doing that over in Asia, in rice paddies and other fields. One of the main uses for the helicopters that I used to fly, the JR, what's a 26cc gas. They used to fly those out there with giant sprayers all the time for those fields, and they'd have it set up on grids and things of that nature. We're just now getting the okay after going through years and years of the FA to be able to do that stuff. But
I was kind of surprised. The article talked about the cost of the drones, anywhere from these large agricultural drones, anywhere from 50 to 80,000. But they said, which seems expensive until you compare it to the cost of a big tractor or combine, which can be up to $700,000. So they said this really has an ability to change the calculus for farmers, which is kind of cool. But again, it goes to the point that our drones are getting better, and they can stay aloft longer, and they can go out farther, and you can send them out in swarms and stuff. And then
the ones that we talk about.
Right. The ones that we know about and can talk about. And I just wanted to, for the audience out there that isn't familiar with Mick West, you can do an internet search to look him up. But essentially, he's a guy that does a lot of 3D physics simulations. I think in the gaming world initially. Is that right, Ben? Maybe you know more. I thought it was in the gaming world, but
he's done some gaming stuff. My knowledge and having dealt with his stuff has been mostly through, the debunking of major UFO events on Reddit and some of the other groups that I frequent. And I have my own opinions on the guy. Yeah.
So he's created his own proprietary software called SITREC, and essentially in this UFO documentary we watched, they had him in there explaining his software, and essentially he took the flight the recorded video flight information from the cockpits of the Navy planes, took the data on, the camera angle and the plane velocity and all of these different factors, and fed it into his software so he could figure out how far out this object was that they were seeing on their screens, and the relative movement of the aircraft that was taking the picture, and the other thing to show that in his summation that what they were seeing was another aircraft at an odd angle that was this distance. And they talked a lot about the parallax illusion.
Unfortunately, another aircraft at those distances, even a weird distance where you're seeing it weirdly, would have been picked up by all the other people that are out there running the training exercises. It's not that simple. I think he means well. I think he's got some good ideas, but he really is trying to mold this into this narrative of a conventional explanation when it's ignoring so much more of the stuff that's also going on out there. I mean, if it was a plane, these guys that fly around planes all day, I mean, they'd know, and they'd be picking up on radar. It's not a radar evading plane that's, going from 80,000 feet to sea level in 1.5 seconds, and then doing what it's doing and speeding off. I mean, those things are not, and they're witnessed by people and witnessed by systems. So there's parts of it that he can say, this part I can conventionally explain with this software in this conventional way, but it ignores so much more of what happened and of all the other people involved. And, everybody's like, well, where's the proof? And that everybody's waiting for the proof,
Right.
But absence of that doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Whatever that is. So
Carl Sagan, man.
Yeah, I think I think to your point, Ben, the ultimate gist of what we're saying here is that there are individuals on both sides of this thing, right? And you need to look at each side with a bit of skepticism to say, okay, these guys are UFO skeptics, and they're basing their reputation and making their money on the skeptic side of things, just as there are people on the positive UFO side saying these things do exist, and they're making money off of their books and their theories. And the truth maybe is somewhere in the middle. There's
somewhere in the middle. Yes.
Yeah.
There's extreme sides to this, and neither extremism is bad for everybody. And that's one of the things I like about some of the subreddits that you're on, is that those guys are the first ones, even though it's a UFO thing, to tear down just about every video that comes in there as being birds or something conventional, drones or whatever. It's very rare to get something through that's like, we don't know, that exhibits a characteristic that's completely foreign and that no government possesses. So I mean, I'm right there with you with regards to skepticism, but I just think he's on the extreme end of debunking, and that's not good. Neither is the extreme end of saying that this is exactly what happened and I have all the answers, because
because nobody does.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, damn it, I thought we were gonna figure out that UFOs existed or didn't exist on our show today. Looks like we'll have to keep watching the skies and
the truth is out
reports.
There.
If you see a bunch of lights together, just know it's probably Starlink, so don't freak out about it.
If you see a train of lights going across the sky at night, it's probably Elon Musk's got another launch going up.
I've seen that once. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah, I have seen that.
And the first, I mean, it's pretty cool when you see it, and if you haven't seen it, or you've just been living under a rock and aren't sure, you probably look up and be like, that's a phenomenon,
Right.
Probably freak out because it is pretty gnarly looking, but
and I think I'll finish with just one side note here that folks, if you haven't heard about it already, you're probably not paying much attention to the news, but we've got a solar eclipse coming up on April 8th, which should be quite spectacular, especially if you're in the zone of totality, which we're not here in Omaha, but Linda and I, at least, are planning to head down into the zone of totality. Anyone else planning to go see it? Ben?
No.
I've been thinking about it pretty heavily. You only get so many of those in your lifetime, and they're very rare. And I remember very much the last one, and I think it would be worth. It's just things don't line up that way very often here in the United States. So
right. Yeah, we're going down towards in the area of Carbondale, Illinois. So
really,
yeah.
We're
are you going to get your telescope out?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been. I got a new C-Star S50. I got it a couple of weeks ago, so I've been setting it up during the day and capturing photos of the sun and getting it all tested out. So I'm ready.
All
to
your
shoot.
filters and everything ready to go.
So I'm all ready to go.
Nice.
And a friend of mine, Zach, he also ended up getting a C-Star S50. Based on the fact that it was like so cool. And I mean, it really is it kind of blew me away when I first saw it, because it's only $500. It does astrophotography. You don't really have to know anything. You basically put it out there, you set it up, turn it on. It goes up and it figures out where it is using GPS. It's got a compass, so it knows which way it's facing. It goes up and takes a picture of the sky and compares it to an internal database, so it knows where it's looking. And then on your tablet or your cell phone or whatever, you just tell it what celestial object you want to see, and it tracks right to it, locks it in, and follows it, whether it's the moon, the sun, some distant nebula, whatever. It was just amazing for the price point for entry. So I couldn't.
You get a good enough picture, I will get a copy hung on my wall.
All right, I will see to it. So, all right. Well, I think that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the show today. And
well, let me throw something out just real quick. If you're going to look at if you even think you're going to be tempted to look at the eclipse, get your glasses now.
Right. Make sure they're ISO certified. I think it's the
last round. I'm not going to go, but the last round I gave out like 100 pairs.
Yeah.
The day of the eclipse, because people were going to look at it
right.
I just use binoculars.
Yeah, just use binoculars. And,
just use binoculars.
Yeah, you can actually get. I got binoculars, but I got solar filters for my binoculars as well. So, and that's in 2017.
Don't do that, people.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't look at it without solar filters, is what Ben's saying.
ISO 123 122.
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure they have the ISO 123 122 number stamped on them. Then you'll know that they're official, appropriate for viewing the sun. But you can also get little solar filters to cover your binoculars. So, and that's how Linda and I watched the eclipse in 2017. So, and the cool thing about this one is this year's eclipse is going to be twice as long as the one in 2017. So
really,
yeah. So about 4.5 minutes versus about 2.5, 2:20 last time in 2017. And if you don't see it this year, it doesn't happen again until I think it's 2057, something like that.
20 years from now.
2054. Yeah, 20 years from now.
In the United States.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. So, Ben, I think you need to think about it. We'll talk. All right, folks. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. And if anything, we hope you take away the fact that you need to look at everything with a healthy dose of skepticism. Don't go off the deep end into the belief that everything's a UFO or that nothing's a UFO and that they aren't visiting. The truth is probably somewhere in between. There's a lot of things we don't know. There's a lot of things we do know. And just get out there and look at things, take the information in, and when you see something that looks like it's an extraordinary claim, look for extraordinary evidence to back it up, or at least question it a little bit, and don't just fall for everything hook, line, and sinker in either direction. So,
Good
All
advice.
right. Thanks for joining us, Ben. We appreciate having you on the show today.
Yeah.
And Chris, Charles, thank you, and Linda for joining. And we will catch you all next time. See you later.
Yep,
Later.
peace
Later.
out.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. For more information and past episodes, please visit our website at galacticdriftwood.space or subscribe to us on YouTube. And now, please deactivate your cranial downlinks, collect your towels, and be sure to watch your step as you exit our gravity well.